worldview can be studied from within cultures, philosophy. Cultures within worldview is also the study from the way a culture acts within an individual space. So it's important to understand the difference and understand that. So as far as the difference between Afrocentricity versus Eurocentricity, as far as its education terms, as well as pedagogy. Pedagogy is your method and your ways of teaching, or your methods and practices of teaching any type of concept, especially when you're talking about in school wise. So the difference was we seen is that in Afrocentricity base of the occasion, a scenario would say that a teacher cannot limit African student by making them question their self-worth by not knowing their people's history, because their people's history is seldom told. Seldom meaning rarely or infrequently, and we also see in history that it's inaccurately told, which we must add that to the list because that's very important. So that's the goal that we want to accomplish in an Afrocentric education, is for that not to happen. As well, it's very important that we must place ourselves as subjects in history and not objects in history. Placing yourself as an object in history incites you to tell history surrounding yourself as the middle object, when you should be telling history as the center object, as we should be existing as subjects around history as the center object. I hope that was a good explanation of that. So that's what Afrocentricity approaches as its education basis. And also, all content areas can adopt this Afrocentric view. And so that lets the African Americans see that they're in the central reality of whatever world or viewpoint or who adopts this Afrocentric view. Now, to observe the Eurocentricity in our education, huge. We can see, for example, we must talk schools. We say schools are a direct reflective of the societies that build them. Schools are told to follow a school curriculum. This school curriculum was put in based upon Eurocentric education, a Eurocentric point of view. So schools are reflecting a Eurocentric education. And in doing that, you can see that will cause a disassociation within one's own culture. How? Because due to the education system, which is set in play to emphasize and display a Eurocentric education, in doing this is causing a disassociation within one's own culture. And if one continues to blindly follow this and blindly conditionally be trained to automatically think and trained to think this way, then they will continue to adopt these American Eurocentric ways unknowingly and continue to be lost within their own cultures, and because they will not be able to find themselves. And so that is that, and that's bad. We must change that. So this will overlap into my next topic of a shattered consciousness. So the shattered consciousness idea was the author of that is I.E. Armah. He is the star, as I said, the author of this idea, but I would say the shining light on this would be Wade Nobles. So the idea of the shattered consciousness could be broken down into two main ideas: mental imprisonment, and as well as conceptual incarceration. Conceptual incarceration is the act or the action of one unwillingly and unconsciously automatically doing an action because of the condition that they've been conditioned to be in, or the condition that they have been trained to be in, due to Eurocentric ways, and they're adopting Eurocentric or European American ways, cultures, tradition, ways of thinking, and unknowingly, and they're using this to apply this to try to understand African or African American history and reality. And this is a huge problem, and you can't do this. that is the idea of an conceptual incarceration, is conditionally making one or conditionally training one to automatically think a certain way or do an action a certain way, unknowing, without them unknowing that they're conditionally trained to do that. A mental imprisonment. Think mental imprisonment is literally trapping one's mental capability of, one, being only able to think a certain way, two, not being able to think a certain way, or three, getting rid of that choice and option to think either or, meaning they don't even have the option of thinking of A or B. They're trained to only think of A, only A. And that is terrible. Think of how scary it is to eliminate one's choice of thinking or one's idea of an imaginative thinking, and them only be able to thinking of one way to do things, one thing, just only one way. And that's terrible. So that is what a mental imprisonment is. And so this all ties into the idea of the African consciousness, and as well as the identity being shattered overall by the overall dominance over their ancestors, space, place, traditions, culture, and history, due to the Eurocentric ways of teaching and the Eurocentric education, as well as the Eurocentric system and the Europeans. So that is very huge, and so it is important for the individual to develop a double consciousness. That is the ability of one to be able to see themselves through another person's or another ethnic group's point of view. It is very important to be able to see that. Also, to acknowledge our own views. Now, the view is one's different perspective of the world based upon their own beliefs or experiences in their own life. For example, I am an African male. I see all the time police beating on African American males. So, for example, my view, I may think of the world as a very America per se doesn't like Africans. That could be my view or my different perspective of the world based upon my life or beliefs and experiences upon my life. So it is very important to acknowledge all of that, to be able to come together and take on this problem of shattered consciousness. And the next and last topic is, how important is it to withstand an eyewitness for comedics and through the K-12 education system? Well, first of all, for us, it is huge. An eyewitness is a primary source, someone who initially seen something. If somebody shoots somebody in front of me, I am an eyewitness. I'm a primary source. It's important because an eyewitness is a seeing person who can identify what has been there. So our eyewitness and our comedics and our entire Afrocentricity and this entire idea of what we comedics education, what we think of, our eyewitness for that was Herodotus. Now, we do know eyewitnesses can lie or tell misleading or wrong events, which Herodotus has done, but it was clear as day Herodotus could see. He was not blind. In fact, in history documented it so that he was able to tell Indians apart from African Americans. He was able to tell that, hey, those are two same types of browns, but they are two different types of browns that have two different type of cultural representations and meanings. He was able to identify and see that, therefore he was not colorblind. And he himself said that when he was there, Egyptians, the Ethiopians, he seen dark skin and black woolly hair. So it's important. That's an eyewitness, and it's important to have that as an account. As for example, Eurocentricity, they have no eyewitness. Their founder, father of history, is his acknowledgement is based upon secondary sources, no eyewitnesses, and that's very vital to me. How can a system be based upon secondary sources and deny a system that has an eyewitness account? And so it's important that our K-12 education is shown that as well, because it's not only important to be able to come up with these ideas, epistemologies, these ways of thinking, but it's important to be able to prove them and confirm them. And a primary source, an eyewitness, which is a primary source, allows you direct confirmation to doing so. So that is very important in doing that and finding that. Thank you for listening. I am Alan Clark. Thank you for your attention and your time. Thank you.